Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our DraftKings NBA picks for Tuesday, actually March 1st now. We're into, the month of March right now. It's a six-game slate. It's kind of game. Charlotte's favored by about 13 points, so that's the one game that I'd be, a little weary of. I still think you can use some of the guys on the Charlotte side. A lot of them are priced down a little bit in a high-paced matchup against a bad defensive team. I wouldn't be looking too much for a lot of the guys on the Phoenix side, though. Other than maybe some of the cheap options, I don't think I really want to mess too much with the team that's, likely to get blown out in this one. Other than that, though, I think all the other spreads are below 10 points. The highest total game should be no surprise. We got the Golden State Warriors on the slate today. The thing that is a little bit of a question, though, Steph Curry's listed as questionable after rolling his ankle in that game. Obviously, for anybody who watched that game, he came back in and looked pretty good at the end of that game. So I'm not really concerned that he could miss that game, but I did just want to make sure everybody knows he's listed as questionable, because if he does miss this game, you always got to look at Sean Livingston whenever he's out. Livingston very cheap on all the sites, and if there's no Steph Curry, you got to think it's going to be a big boost for Livingston. Probably also a boost for guys like Klay Thompson, who will do more scoring, and Draymond Green, who will probably wind up racking up some assists. And I think he'll score more than 2 points today, or at least I would definitely take that bet as a gambling man. But right now we're going to get into three of the guys who we're looking at tonight who we think are in good spots. So let's call up the slideshow and talk about three of the guys that we're going to be using. Three of the guys who we think are really well priced and are going to be top targets are Brook Lopez at 7,500, Dwayne Wade at 7,100, and David Lee making an appearance here for probably the first time all season at $4,000. So Brook Lopez plays in a game that has a 211 total on the day, which is one of the higher ones. And he's going up against the Los Angeles Lakers defense, which has been giving up points to basically everybody. The Lakers are one of the best matchups at just about every position on the floor. And with Lopez being the high usage guy with a 28% usage rate for the Brooklyn Nets, I think he's the guy who's going to benefit the most from it. He's had some big games and a few clunkers, but he's gone over 6.2x in 4 of his last 6 games. So he does have that upside, definitely a good GPP kind of play. I do think he can put up 40 to 50 fantasy points here. He had 46 fantasy points against the Lakers earlier this year, which would be, a little bit above 6x, would be about that 6.2x that he's been at. So we've already seen him do it against this Lakers team, and that was earlier in the year when they still had Jared Jack and, Joe Johnson and everybody was healthy. So without some of those guys in the lineup, we've seen Brook Lopez being, targeted a little more. We've seen guys have big games against LA. So I think this is a pretty good spot for him at only 7,500. Next guy we're going to talk about is Dwayne Wade. He's got a soft matchup against that Brooklyn Nets defense in the same game. We still have Chris Bosh out. So Wade is like basically the number one option by a large margin down there in Miami. His usage rate is the highest of any player on the board today at 35%. So whenever he's in there, he definitely makes sure that he gets, he gets his shots and the ball is in his hand a lot. He's been 6.6x in 2 of his last 3 games. So without Bosh since the break, since he's been back, he's been putting up some pretty big numbers. So I think there's a chance that we get, a 40 to 45 point fantasy game out of Dwayne Wade here today, which would be a great return of, 6x or better. The Nets are going to be rolling out guys like Donald Sloan and Bojan and Markel Brown at the 2 to try to stop him. And I just don't think that any of those guys are going to have a chance to slow him down. So in a game where, I think Wade is going to have high usage, I think the game stays close enough that he gets, his full allotment of minutes. I don't think it's a stretch to ask him for, 35 to 45 fantasy points. I think that's right around where he's going to drop and would be, somewhere between like 5 and a little bit over 6x if he gets in there for us today. The last guy I'm going to talk about is a cheap salary saver that I really like, and that's David Lee at $4,000. He was cut by the Boston Celtics and signed by the Dallas Mavericks. So his Mavericks are favored by 5 in a game with a 213 total. Since coming over to the Mavericks 3 games ago, he's been seeing about 20 to 25 minutes a game since his signing, and he basically has a double-double in his last 2 games. The last game, I think he wound up with like 14 points and 9 rebounds, so he was 1 rebound shy of the double-double. But he still put up some pretty good numbers. He's averaging 34 fantasy points in those last 2 games that he's been on Dallas. So I think that right now he's just too cheap for the new role and the production that he's been giving us. If we can get 25 minutes out of David Lee, get 25 to 30 fantasy points, which would be 6 to 7x, maybe even a little bit above that. And that would be a great return for us on the day for a guy like, David Lee, who I think we can get cheap and roll into our rosters and, really have some upside on the day for it. So that's where I'm looking right now. I wanted to give you guys a salary saving option since the other 2 guys are, in that 7K range. I really like that 7 to 8K range over on DraftKings. I feel like people either try to pay up for the 10K superstars or they try to go down into that 5 or 6K range and see what kind of value that they find. So a lot of guys in that 7K range, guys like Kemba Walker, guys like Giannis, the Greek Freak, those guys have been in that 7K range and have been very low owned and wound up helping people win some tournaments in the last month or so. So I do think that that's a great place to look in your GPPs. If you can, instead of taking a 10K guy, if you can get 2 guys in that 7 to 8K range, I think you usually wind up with much lower ownership on those guys. And that does go a long way in the tournament, especially if you choose guys that, have big days and can give you that upside. So for me, those are some of the guys that I'm going to be looking at tonight. Probably going to be some of the guys that round out a lot of my rosters. Like I said, I like that, that Nets and Miami game. Miami's been playing at, a little bit of a higher pace, been putting up some more points lately, and the Nets are just really bad defensively. So I think that game could be one where we see some, decent fantasy scores come out of it. Guys like Whiteside are in play. Guys like that Young are in play in that game. Maybe even a Goran Dragic. Not so much on Luol Deng, although I don't hate his matchup either. But I do think that's a game that's going to have some sneaky value tonight. So I definitely want to make sure I have some exposure there. And like I said, the big news is going to be the Steph Curry news. So make sure you follow that. Remember, the Warriors are at home where they tend to blow people out. Curry actually tends to play more and have bigger numbers when he's on the road. So even if he is in tonight, I do think there's a chance that he misses value. I know he's going to be very highly owned coming off the monstrous games that he's had lately and the 10 and 12 3-point field goals that he hit in the last couple. But just be a little bit cautious of that. I do think this is a day that, Steph Curry would be one of my fades if I was doing the fade article today. So thank you guys for joining us here at rotocurve.com. And as always, stay classy, DFS.